In this video, we'll look at some of the causes, some of the sources of depression. And these are some of the sources I'm familiar with, but I'd like to hear, what do you think are the sources of your depression, particularly sources that I may not mention here? So one of the biggest causes I'm aware of depression is the following scenario. So we all have a certain sense of justice, a certain sense of rightness, a certain sense of fairness. And naturally, we pursue that. We pursue what is good. And particularly as children, we pursue what is good for us, a sense of that, in a right and a just world, we get what we need to be at our best. And so that's a drive, and that's moving in a certain direction. And remember, depression is a reduction in energy in many cases. And so one of the ways that you can get a reduction in energy is you put two energies inside yourself against each other, and the net effect is much lower. And so, for example, if you take $100, so you take $100, and then you take $50, and you hire someone to steal the other $50. Now you have nothing, right? You had $100. You had 100% of your energy, but you take a part of your energy and you use that energy to suppress or undermine another part of you, another energy, and suddenly you have nothing, right? And so this is one of the ways that we run out of energy, meaning we started with a lot of energy, but what comes out the other side is almost nothing. And so if we start out with a sense of justice, we're kind of infused with this is the right thing to do, this should be done, etc., we're moving along that path. But then we encounter a bully that is opposed to justice. Now, the problem is not that they're opposed to justice. The problem is that they're 5 times bigger. You should have a right to go to school and eat your own lunch. That's only common sense, right? It's your food. It's packed for you. You need to eat. You should be able to go to school and eat your own lunch. The problem is 5 boys are waiting around the corner. And as primarily a method of humiliation, because most of the time they're not all that interested in the lunch, they're going to see that you don't get your lunch. This is outrageous. This is unjust. That's the voice where you're integrated. But as you push into this mass, into this energy field that is 5 times bigger than you are, you experience increased pain, right? It's, when you run into a concrete wall, the concrete wall doesn't say, ow, you do. Why? Because it's bigger than you, right? So when, as a smaller energy, we encounter injustice, corruption, wrongness, deceit, lies, cruelty, we find something that's wrong. It's not in the service of integrity, of rightness, of anything beautiful, good, or true. It's just wrong. And we know it. We know it's wrong. But it's bigger than us. So the inner warrior, the inner warrioress, fights for what's right, what's beautiful, what's true. That's its nature. That's an archetypal face of every human being. But what happens when one hero, when one heroine goes head to head with an army. Now, of course, in the fantasy novels, the heroine, the hero sometimes wins, right? One person standing in front of 200,000 armed men, right? Single-handedly cuts them all down, right? That's the fantasy that's created as medicine for the broken hero, for the broken heroine. What usually happens is that the larger mass of energy inflicts so much pain on the smaller mass of energy that a shift in identity occurs, a shift in the pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. Before, we were all focused on the righteous path to justice, right? We get to go to school and eat our own lunch and don't get harassed by bullies. I mean, after all, we saw them at church, right? They're supposed to be Christian, right? They're supposed to be, protecting the meek and all. This is such an outrage, right? So that's what we want to have happen. And we fight for that right. This is unfair. You're a bully, da-da-da-da-da, right? But when that leads to more and more pain, more and more helplessness, more and more humiliation than we can bear, we realize that for every comment we make, we get beaten up so much. For every time we try to run away, we get tackled harder. And so we develop a new stance, a new identity. It's called learned helplessness. You can teach it to dogs or rats, by the way. What you do, if you want to teach an animal how to give up on their life and stop fighting for anything worthwhile, namely their own survival. If you want to train a rat to just give up and die, it's not that hard. What you have to do is you have to traumatize the rat. You have to traumatize the dog again and again. That's the first step. And the second thing you have to do is you have to set up an environment where no matter how hard they try and escape the pain, they can't. So you brutally traumatize a living being, and you set up an environment where they cannot escape, or, if you're particularly sadistic, where the pain increases in direct proportion to the healthy behavior you take. Healthy behavior, if you're getting an electric shock, this is the sociopathic method by which scientists ascertain the capacity of a human being to teach learned helplessness to an innocent animal, right? Let's electrocute this dog, and then when they try to jump around and escape the electrocution, we'll either make it worse or there'll be no impact. And what happens is after a while, the animal just curls up and waits to die. They regress into a fetal position and wait to die. Now, if you come along with a positive mental attitude and say, come on, dog, fight for yourself, right? Or the cage is now open, right? The cage is now open. Fight, come on, do something useful with your life. No one's stopping you. The dog doesn't believe you. The dog has already learned a neuronal program that says, number one, I'm in a sadistic environment. Number two, nothing I do works. And number three, I'm going to die anyway. It's going to be miserable. Let me just conserve my energy, not get disappointed, and not do anything. And so the dog will... So after you open the cage, you can continually electric shock this dog, and they will just lay there because they've learned that nothing they do matters. You see, and this is what a 6-year-old learns who's ganged up on by 5 bullies every single day. Day 1, he tries to run away. Day 2, he tries to argue. Day 3, he tries to fight 5 kids. And eventually, he learns that absolutely nothing that he does makes any difference at all. Now, it's, of course, 10 times worse when he's got a fucked up dad who's so dumb he doesn't understand the laws of physics and tells the 5-year-old to fight 5 bullies, right? There's a fucked up moron for you. We raise them all the time, right? Be tough, right? You go fight the bullies, right? Or you're no son of mine, right? Really helpful. You know, the kind of stupidity we would expect from parentally illiterate cultures that don't teach a single competent hour of parenting. Let's shame the 5-year-old for not defying the laws of physics, right? Absolute stupidity. Well, he's not going to get any help at home. He's not going to get any help in a sociopathic culture where the person being bullied is ostracized, right? So what does he do? What does he do? He shuts down, tries to leave his body, goes numb, and waits for his tormentors to give up, to get bored hurting him. That's what he does. It's called learned helplessness. Now, every time he gets outraged, every time he gets angry at this injustice in a sociopathic cult, he gets laughed at because he can't win, right? In sociopathic cults, people shame and blame the person who loses. In empathic cults, people help the person who needs help. Sociopathic cults, empathic cults. Well, if you're hurting in humiliation and people laugh at you, that's sociopathic. So you realize that showing any feelings doesn't help. So you have to shut the feelings down. And that seems to work because once your abusers have turned you into an automaton, no reaction, they get bored with you. They want to torment someone who squeals. So you've got to learn to shut your feelings down. Well, that's kind of depression, right? Suppression, depression. You're using all your energy to suppress all your energy because that's the only protocol in a fucked up cult that lets you survive, right? When you've got idiots at home and idiots in other people's home raising bullies in a sociopathic cult that laughs at the loser, well, that's what you get, right? Learned helplessness. So that's one of the primary sources of depression, right? Because aggression, which is the opposite of suppression and depression, aggression is, I'm going to run away from these bastards, right? I'm going to, tell dad and he'll help, right? I'm going to beat them up, right? And I'm going to, make them pay, right? You're not depressed when you're in that state. You are responding to a crisis. You're responding to injustice, to cruelty, to stupidity, to pain. But when the response makes it worse, when everything that you do to respond to injustice makes it worse, you eventually stop responding to injustice. And in order to do that, you've got to spend energy. See, all your energy down here before you met the bully was pointing towards justice. But you've now got to split your energy because that didn't work. In a sociopathic cult that raises and rewards bullying, fighting injustice doesn't work. So you've got to split yourself. So you've still got the part screaming, this isn't fair, this isn't unfair, and going that way. But now you divide yourself in half. That's a good way to weaken yourself and weaken your energy. And you point it in the other half, in the other direction. Don't say anything. Don't show your feelings. Show your feelings. Stand up for what's right. Don't show your feelings. Don't stand up for what's right. Don't say anything to the bully. Don't look him in the eye. Look him in the eye. Tell him what a jerk he is. Don't look in the eye, right? So you've now split yourself, and half of your energy is outraged and wants to express, and the other half is saying, shut up or you're going to die. No more energy left. What's left? Limp, numb, traumatized depression, right? So this is a big source. When the bigger energy in a sociopathic environment is cruel, abuses power, hypocritical, lies, unjust, towards the smaller energy, you will get depression. Now, this happens in, bullying dynamics. It also happens in chauvinistic cultures of a more traditional nature. So if we look at, for example, 100 years ago, and there's a transition going on, but, there are many 50, 60, 70-year-old men and women who haven't gone fully through this transition and who are carrying remnants of old stereotypes. So another area of this tension is the male-female tension. So here's where this ties in. So in this case, we're going to have the female as the smaller energy, and it's really important in order to honor, the dynamic here, to accept the fact that we have Olympics. The reason we don't just have a bisexual Olympics is because in most cases, the men would win every single time because of the laws of physics. We're talking size, we're talking orientation towards, more narrow band thought and goal orientation. We're talking cultural sanction. There are a lot of reasons why a man is likely to win. Boxing, it's just common sense. So we have to get beyond the nonsense that the sexes are equal in all areas. They're not. Men are not better than women. Women are also superior to men in many areas, right? Not to mention childbirth. Now imagine for a moment that you're a woman, which means in most cases, this is just a statistic, that if you get into a fist fight with your husband, you're going to come out hurting. You're not going to come out the winner statistically. Otherwise, women would beat men in the Olympics, right? So you're not going to come out better, right? And then you're in a patriarchal framework where you're supposed to stay home, and that effectively means that the male controls more of the money. So you've got size, one form of power. You've got money, another form of power. Then you've got the rather uncomforting awareness that the top deity in every one of the religions is male. Jesus, not female. Buddha, not female. Muhammad, not female. The Latter-day Saints, whatever it is, you go around the world and you look at these, different religions, and they're not celebrating females. God is supposedly, we're asked to believe, male. Now, that's not particularly encouraging. And then out of that, your church leaders are, of course, biased towards men. And then you have something like an affair, right? So you've watched your husband have an affair, and you couldn't do anything about it because you had 2 kids, right? So you can't fight it direct because you lose in a head-on collision. That creates depression. Now, women experience more depression than men statistically. And it would make sense in this line of depression. If you're losing, not because you're wrong, but because you're smaller and you're poorer, and the cult is biased against you, that's learned helplessness, just like that little boy being bullied, right? Now, so your husband has an affair. Oh, that's just what men do. But then you have an affair, and he has a fit, right? And you can't fight head to head, right? He's got a bigger body, right? So you have to learn to suppress the energy of outrage more often, right? So this is why it's so unhealthy to be in relationships with an imbalance of power, right? So one imbalance of power is physical size. Another imbalance of power is financial mass. One person's got $100 a week, another person's got $100,000 a week. That's an imbalance of mass. It's an imbalance of power, right? With $100,000 a week, you can do all kinds of harm. And it's not, we're looking at all areas, but as part of that, we're looking at this aspect. Why might women be more likely to be depressed in a situation where their aggression is not going to win? But also, you see, cults attack female aggression as being not sexy, which is a big attack because that's, for whatever reason, I don't understand it entirely, but if a man or a woman calls me ugly, I don't really care. I mean, I think, I guess that makes them feel good. I mean, what do they have? It doesn't really matter. I mean, that's neither here nor there, right? But women have been programmed in their cult that their value is coming from their beauty, from their sex appeal. And so if women become kind of ugly bitches for being angry, on top of not being able to win in any kind of combat, it creates frustration, it creates depression. Because you feel enraged at the injustice of something, but you don't win unless you put on an enticing or a seductive front. That's the exact opposite. You want to punch them in the face, but you want to win, right? You want to punch them in the face and win, not punch them in the face, and now your finances go down, people think you're a bitch, you get in a fight and end up the worse for it, right? So it's that similar dynamic, right? Because anytime you have a large energy and a smaller energy in a collision, the large energy always wins. That's the law of mass. But the law of intelligence says that the most intelligent people are always, or are among the smallest people, right? You think of, well, is the majority of people a genius? No. A very small minority is a genius. So you have the most intelligence concentrated in a very small number of people, but you have the most mass, the most energy concentrated in the majority. So when the minority collides with the majority, many times the minority is correct is superior, is more intelligent. But the majority wins anyway, right? That's the dynamic with the 6-year-old and the bullies. The 6-year-old is right. It just doesn't matter. When you're talking with the law of physics, the law of mass, it doesn't matter whether it's fair or not. It doesn't matter whether it's right or not. It doesn't matter whether it's intelligent or not. All that matters is a crowd is going to do this, whether it's right or wrong, and there's no counter crowd to stop them. That's the law of mass. And it is a soul-crushing law. To watch what's good, beautiful, and true be crushed by something bigger that's stupid and has nothing going for it other than that it's big. It's enraging. And yet, expressing rage at something much bigger than you, you know? You're angry because the polar bear ate your lunch, right? How dare they, right? It doesn't matter. If running and punching the polar bear ends your life, you're still dead, right? So this is where depression is a life-saver, but it's also a disease, right? Because once you learn that the best way to not get killed is to capitulate, is to be silent, is to not argue, right? You can go all around the world and look at dinner tables. And there are certain people that seem to always win anytime there's an argument. And what you'll often find is parties in that system, parties in that family system, in that government system, who they say, who has any else ideas? And they all say, oh, no ideas, right? No. You know, what you said is correct, right? Because every single time they say, that's wrong, they get a verbal beating. They get perhaps other forms of punishment. And they don't win anyway, right? They just come out looking stupid. Again, yes, you're always right. Yes, I'm sure we don't even need to go there. You're always right. And yet, that is a certain form of learned helplessness, a certain form of learned depression. I used to have opinions, but after I lost every single argument 200 times in a row, I no longer have opinions. Yes, dear, that's absolutely right. Couldn't have said it better myself. No. And so that's a form of suppression. Now, you have the impulse to have an opinion, but then you have the impulse to avoid the 45-minute follow-up, which ends up with you looking like a schmuck and the other person saying, see what a dumb person you are, right? And you don't have the energy or the skill to come back at it. So I'm just going to avoid that, right? So I no longer have any opinion. So naturally, right? So what you can see is depression in some levels is a conservation of energy. In some level, at some levels, it is survival, right? Now, in immunodeficient diseases, et cetera, you have something a little bit similar where like the immune system of the warrior or the warrioress starts out fighting the wrong that's out there. Well, when it meets such a big wrong that it can't win, it starts fighting the part that tries to fight the wrong. So the warrior fights itself. The warrior gets out the sword ready to hit the opponent, then remembers what happens and hits itself instead as being a better tactic for surviving than actually threatening something that could destroy it. And so the warrior turns in on itself psychologically. I'm so dumb, I shouldn't have said that. I apologize. I exist. I'm so sorry I had that feeling. I had that thought, and then I know it was so stupid of me to say it. What was I thinking? Let's just get back to your way of looking at it, because, I was dumb enough to have this thought, and before I caught myself, I actually said it. And what an idiot, right? Dumb old me having a thought, right? So I turn the blade inward psychologically so that you don't have to, and I don't have to wait for the attack. It's very efficient, right? You're going to eviscerate me if I take a stand for anything. And so rather than taking a stand for anything, let me eviscerate myself to, one, save time, two, because then I'm prepared for it. It's not out of my control because I'm eviscerating myself. And three, it's over with, right? When I stop eviscerating myself, maybe I'll watch your facial expressions. And once you soften, meaning that I've beaten myself up enough that maybe you're going to comfort me rather than eviscerate me. Once you've done that, then I'll stop eviscerating. And now I know it's over and I don't have to wait for your attack, right? That I never win anyway. So this is very intelligent, right? So I've now got used to attacking myself psychologically. Well, immunodeficiency diseases are similar to that physically. There's some part in the body that wants to move, and the other part of the body immediately attacks it, like that's going to get us killed, right? And let's kill it, right? You have an impulse, you have some energy, let's kill it, right? So now I'm exhausted, right? And there may be some correlation, right? People that have learned to eviscerate themselves continually as a survival strategy and have benefited in abusive environments from eviscerating themselves may take that to a physical thing. Like, I'll just get sick and then nobody will see me as a threat. I'm watching a Chinese movie right now, and there's an interesting thing in the family dynasty where there's competition from the different mistresses to have their son become the next ruling monarch. And they're quite happy to murder and poison and do all kinds of stuff in order to climb rank. But if a child is sickly and has no chance of gaining the monarchy, they're very kind to it because he's not a threat. And so one son who realizes that he will be killed if he demonstrates his true potential, who realizes he will be killed if he demonstrates his true potential, hides, pretends he's sick, pretends he's dumb, makes deliberate public mistakes that guarantee that he will not be considered for the throne, because that's the only way to stay alive. Now, we may think, oh, we're so much superior to, we're no longer in monarchies, we're no longer in this. But what about the competition to be the favorite child versus the black sheep with an older brother that can cause immense pain? Or the challenge, particularly in dependent relationships where one person is providing all of the financial security. What about the battle not to be thrown out for someone better, right? What about that battle, right? Because unless you're really independent, and this is a real push for the direction of personal power, if you develop a personal competency that makes you independent financially, physically, relationally, etc., on others, then you don't have to, you can choose to, but you don't have to, out of fear and terror, silence your truth to avoid trauma. Because if you are in a dependent relationship, it is highly traumatic for the relationship to end, because when it ends, your survival and your security in your survival ends, as well as your love and belonging. If you don't know how to love yourself, if you hate yourself and your partner is good to you, and they're providing your survival, your security, your love and belonging, and your idea is that's great, just keep it up, right? Well, then that's not as attractive in some cases. For a highly confident person, they like someone else that's more independent. So, but if you lose that relationship, you lose your ability to meet your human needs. And that is what trauma is. What's going to happen to me? I don't know, because I'm not in control. I've given that control to other people by refusing to develop my independent abilities. So if you want to avoid that, develop your independent abilities to such an extent that your life will be full, that you will have your own needs fulfilled by you. So if the relationship ends, maybe you have more money. Maybe you're more secure. Maybe your love and belonging increases. I mean, that's not a bad place to be. If you're a master at meeting your own needs, your well-being goes up when the relationship ends. If you're dependent, for whatever reason, your relationship goes, or your well-being goes down. It is a traumatic event. So this is all in the domain of imbalance of power combined with injustice, unfairness, cruelty, sociopathic behavior, bullying, abuse of power, whatever. Imbalance of power, abuse of power, dependency, right? You're in the hands. You've got nowhere else to go, right? As a 5-year-old, you can't go back to dad. He's a chauvinist and get help from the bully. He'd tell you to fight them yourself, right? And shame you. You can't outrun the bullies. They're bigger than you. You've got nowhere else to go. So you're in a dependent situation. You can't just say, you know what? I picked the wrong family. These parents are fucked up. Let's get out of here. And, live with some sane parents that are kind. And, if people can't take care of 5-year-olds in their town, let's move to another town, right? Another country, why not? Another culture, right? Let's find people who are intelligent and empathic. And now I'm not helpless at all. And I will stand up for justice and I'll do the right thing because it's the right thing to do and everything's great, right? I don't have to split myself and spend half of my energy attacking the other half so that I don't die, right? So that's this whole kind of arena of depression. So that's employees. So we got the same dynamic with an employee. A boss is fucking around, but the boss can get you fired if you do your job, which might lead to the boss looking bad. So you've got to do a bad job. Maybe you've even got to apologize for your competency so that your boss doesn't feel threatened, right? So same dynamic in boss, same in romantic relationships, same in sibling, same in marriage. Any human relationship, basically, where you have an imbalance of power and a sociopathic tendency and a dependency. So you can change it in any of those ways. So you can get more power, so now there's no imbalance of power. You can be independent, so now they carry on being a fucked up bully the way they always were, but just not to you. So you can get more power, you can get more independence, or they can become just, which isn't really in your, in your control. If they wanted to become just, they probably would have done so, right? So that's the other variable, but that's the one that's out of your control. You've got control to some extent, not as a 5-year-old, but to some extent as an older person. You've got control on how powerful you become, and through that power, how independent you become, right? So you don't have to attack yourself if you are either powerful enough to fight and win or independent enough to leave. And leaving is, of course, way better, right? So independence is the way out here. To learn how to create the ability to meet your own needs somewhere in the world. Doesn't have to be in this town, doesn't have to be in this family, doesn't have to be in this country. But somewhere in the world, you've got to find the ability to become independent enough that you can be who you want to be, regardless of how other people in this or that particular location choose to behave. Because you don't have control over whether or not a bully wants to be a bully. You have control over whether or not you earn enough income that you can move away from that particular bully, right? So that's the kind of resolution of, of that field. But many people do not know how. They don't have a clear map. They don't have role models. And so they're just stuck knowing that if they express aggression, they will be hurt, or their body attacks them for fear of being hurt. And they don't really know anything else to do, right? They're just stuck in that abusive power dynamic. This can be a landlord-tenant situation where I don't have the money to move, and my landlord is being a bigger and bigger dick. Now he's doing this, now he's doing this, but I don't have the money to move. And if I point out his stupidity, he might evict me, right? Or raise the rent or something. So I have to be nice to this fucking asshole because I'm not independent. I haven't learned the skills necessary. My health is another thing, right? I can't make any money. I depend on you. You're being a fucking asshole, but I can't go anywhere else, right? That's depressing. I've got to suppress my anger so that you won't attack me in a fight that I will lose. Big, big source of depression. Now, another whole arena of depression is dynamics that cost you more energy than they cost the other person. So every time we interact, you say, "Hey, how are you?" And I say, "Well, let me think about it. I'm this and this and this and this." And they say, "Oh, I gotta go," right? And then they do it again. "Hey, how are you?" "Oh, I don't actually want to hear what you have to say," right? So we're in a dynamic where you spend a little bit of energy and I spend a lot of energy, and then you dishonor the energy, right? You make me feel small. And I don't know how to get out of it. Maybe I'm too nice, for example, and don't say, "Go fuck yourself, you're not interested, go fuck yourself," right? That's one way of dealing with that. But in this can be a power dynamic. So like what we talked about before, it can also be like, this is my habit, like I give thoughtful responses. Or it may be that, for example, I'm more generous. Every time I ask for something, they say, "Oh, I'd love to do that, I've got to run." And every time they ask you for something, you spend 2 or 3 hours giving it to them at a convenient time, and they abuse that, right? And yet, so this ties then into, why is that going on? Usually it ties into, at some level, there's a power fear, right? I'm afraid of confrontation. That could be one thing. Now, one of the other kind of areas that this plays out is the terrain of sensitivity. Now, here's how this works, because what we're talking about is a relational dynamic that drains one person more than it drains the other person. So an unequal expenditure of energy, number one. Number two, now YouTube, for example, can be that type of environment, right? Because let's say I pour my heart out in a video like this, and you didn't pour your heart out, right? This person didn't pour their heart out, and they, you or they find some little thing to criticize, right? What a dumb hat, right? Or gosh, he talks forever, right? So some little thing. It takes just 3 seconds. Gosh, doesn't he talk? Ha, right? So now there's a relationship. So you've got something for nothing. You didn't put any energy, and you just do a little bit of a criticism. And because the brain prioritizes negative energy, if I read that, it'll probably affect me longer than it took you to write it and forget about it, or maybe feel superior, or maybe you're enjoying your superiority or something like that. So in a dynamic like this, and it's exacerbated to extent with something that's free, right? I do a lot of this because it bothers me. It bothers me that people are in so much pain in these domains, and people are trying to make a buck off it. That's not empathic. How can I make as much money as possible on people suffering? It's not empathic. I don't like it. So I'm doing this for free, right? And someone can do a little thing, and zing, right? And now I spent energy to do it. And I chose not to make money in order, to offer it. And then someone does a little zinger, and maybe that zinger, because the brain is prioritizing negativity 5 times more than positivity. If you give someone 1 insult and 5 compliments, they'll balance each other out. But if you give someone 1 insult and 2 compliments, they will be in more pain than if nothing had happened, right? That's the degree of prioritization, the default mode with the brain. So if I spend an hour saying all this, and then someone spends 3 seconds criticizing it, that's one of those dynamics, right? There's no way to win in that dynamic other than to just blow them off and, ignore it, which is what most YouTubers will do, is they just ignore their audience, which is often venting, stuff because they're in powerless relationships with other people. They can't talk directly, but it's, in the anonymity, they can become the aggressor in anonymity in an audience, right? So that's a type of example. So I can't be dependent on YouTube for either money or for praise of any kind, or it's not a healthy scenario. So I have to have a different framework. For example, I'm learning a lot, because part of me talks, and then another part of me listens, and then I reflect on what I heard, and then does that true, or does that ring true? What about that? And maybe I say it better next time. Well, I'm trying to beat depression, and that's the real win. Meaning, if I am less depressed because of this series, that's worth millions. So if I'm if I'm less depressed as a result of thinking all this through, then I'm a huge winner, right? But nonetheless, you can see these dynamics where one person is giving more in every interaction and the other is taking more in every interaction, number one. And number two, where the giving is dishonored and discounted in some way, in a way that communicates valuelessness, number two. And number three, that this goes on and is denied, and that I can't, that my body doesn't want to have a confrontation, so I keep going along with it. That's depressing. I want to speak up, but I don't want to deal with their hostility if I do speak up. I want to say no, but my body is uncomfortable. I don't have an identity. I'm supposedly Mr. Nice Guy. Now, if I say no, how am I Mr. Nice Guy? I'm supposed to say yes, how much I love helping all the people that want to use and abuse me, right? And I have a chance to help humanity. So how, if I just say no, you seem a bit arrogant and entitled, and I don't want to support that, so go away. That takes very little energy, right? But I can't do that and be nice. Maybe they'll attack me. Maybe they'll gang up on me next time. They'll gossip around me. What a jerk I've been, right? And now this and this and this. So I have to deal with all that. Or I have to go and give them what they want, right? So, this is a whole other area of depression, because I want to say this, but I'll be punished again. It gets down to that. Now, I mentioned the term sensitivity as being relevant here, and it's because of this. So here are two people, or two demographics. So this is someone who, if you play, well, let's look at this. There's a 5 out of 10 volume setting in music, right? So the volume setting is turned to a 5. And for this person who is neurotypical, they experience 50% sound saturation. It's a comfort zone. And 80% of the people are in this gradient here. But 10 to 20% of the people are in the highly sensitive category. They, when the volume is played at a 5, they experience it as a 9, and it gets uncomfortable. It's overstimulating. Now, what this means is that when a neurotypical and a highly sensitive person connect, the highly sensitive person will be more affected by the neurotypical person than the neurotypical person will be by the highly sensitive person. It's an imbalance of impact. So in an imbalance of impact, it works like this. So you have one person, two person, and plus one punch, right? So there's one punch, right? You got two people. I give you a punch, you give me a punch. I experience the punch as a 9 out of 10 big deal. You experience it as a 5 out of 10 big deal. The net effect is I can take fewer punches than you before I get traumatized or overwhelmed. Now, that makes sense, right? You know, so, and you can see this, to understand this more clearly. Imagine that you've got sunburn, severe skin peeling sunburn, severe sunburn, right? You've been laying on the beach for 3 days in a row, severe sunburn. I don't have any sunburn. And we get together and I give you a slap on the back. Hey, bro. You give me a slap. Hey, bro. Your slap in the back doesn't hurt at all. It's just, whatever. My slap on the back, though, brings tears to your eyes. Oh, don't do that. Don't do that. Oh, gosh, sunburn. And someone else hits you. Oh, please. You know, I'm gonna break down, right? If people keep hitting me on the back in this severe pain, I can't think, I can't function. Now, what are you going to do if you've got severe sunburn in a jock-like chauvinistic setting where the communication protocol is slaps on the back? The harder, the better, right? People are already jockeying for alpha position without any sunburn, right? And if you've got sunburn, the idea of being able to make you cry over a little thing like a slap on the back, this is heaven. to a sociopath, right? So they're going to aim for you, right? Now, what you're going to do is you're going to leave that group because you can't come out ahead in that setting. When the slightest touch, brings excruciating pain, and your biggest whack brings, good to see you, bro. You can't win that dominance game. So if you can't win, there's no way that you can possibly win. You're going to avoid conflict. You're going to avoid competition. You're going to get out of the bar, right? And this is what sensitives learn. Sensitives learn that if they get into a fight, it hurts them more than it hurts someone else. One of the reasons it hurts them more, for example, if you're an empath and you have to say, like someone's being an absolute fucking dick, and they're just plowing forward, right? So you've got to say something because they're too dumb to get that they're being a dick. They're too unconscious to understand the impact, and they're hurting you, right? So dun 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 dun. They're plowing forward, unconscious, fucked up dick, right? You've got to say something. Hey, and for an idiot, it takes some attention. Hey. You awake in there? Hey, stop being a dick. What do you mean? Well, you did this. Why is that? Hey, pay attention, right? You have to make an effort to communicate, to get through their fucked up head that they're having a lot of impact again and again and again. Well, all of that is quite an ordeal for a sensitive person, right? Got to rev up energy, confront all that. Their body doesn't like it, they don't like it, but the other person is too dumb to know that they're dumb, is too insensitive to know that they're insensitive, and is just plowing the fuck along, right? You got to do something. But it doesn't feel good to do something, and it doesn't feel good not to do anything. And the other person probably doesn't care one way or another, right? It doesn't affect them that much. They're not tuned in. They're not sensitive. You see, for a sensitive, it hurts. I mean, you feel what the other person's feeling, and you feel what you're feeling. The other person doesn't feel what they're feeling, and they don't feel what you're feeling. They're too numb, right? It's like, gosh, I'm sorry for you. You're this out of it. And I'm sorry that I have to confront you this loudly before you get it. I don't like confronting you this loudly. I would hate to be you confronted like this. But you're numb to your own feelings, and you're numb to mine. I'm very aware of my feelings, and I'm aware of the feelings you might have if you had any. And I'm aware of what a big deal this is, right? What we're talking about here is destroying your life. This isn't personal. You don't know how to behave, right? So that's a big deal. So a sensitive deals with all of that and the ramifications and all this stuff and thinks about it and pays more attention, remembers it, and wonder how they're doing and all this stuff. An insensitive just has another beer and blots it all out. So there's an asymmetry of impact. Now, in a desensitized, chauvinistic, sociopathic culture, most of what a sensitive is going to get from the cult around them is unpleasant. Oh, I forgot to do this thing that's really important to you. Sorry, that's unpleasant. Oh, I did cheat with your girlfriend and da-da-da-da-da, but, it was no big deal. We just had a few fucks. That's unpleasant, right? So if a sensitive is dealing with high volume shit from a desensitized cult that produces lots of high volume shit that really hurts, the sensitive is playing overwhelm catch up, right? I can't say what I need here because it's too likely that I'm going to have to deal with more of your shit. And I can't confront you here because I'm still dealing with the confrontation that I've had over here. Let me just withdraw and go along with this protocol of being walked on because it's easier than another fucked up confrontation with someone that's too dumb to know that they're dumb, too dumb to understand how they're hurting me, and just doesn't get it, right? Let me do that. So now there's more being walked on, and there's an awareness that I could stand up for myself, but what I'd have to deal with in order to stand up for myself would just be too much. And so I'm not going to do that. I will be too nice. Now, this is a real problem because in a sociopathic environment, if you are too nice by default, the sociopath in the environment, the sociopath within each person and the sociopath that's in every group, will exploit that as weakness. Oh, this person always says yes. Let me ask them for 3 times as many things, then I'll get 3 times as many things without any effort. Isn't that a wonderful deal? Because they feel uncomfortable. And I'll make them feel uncomfortable if they don't say yes. So give me, and oh, you're drained, go fuck yourself, right? I'm not interested in you, I'm interested in myself. So there's a lose-lose dynamic, right? In an empathic culture, if you're unusually generous, you're met with empathy and gratitude and reciprocity. In a sociopathic culture, when you are too generous, you are exploited and manipulated into giving more. Right? So it's particularly depressing, right? If I speak up, I'm going to have to deal with all your bullshit. If I don't speak up, I'm depressing myself to avoid dealing with all your bullshit. So now I'm depressed. So this is, so what we're talking about is an imbalance of impact and an imbalance of drained energy. Now you also have depression with an imbalance of competency. Let's say that I am going to build a house and you're lazy. And so you say, oh, let's build a house together, right? I'll contribute and we'll build a house together. But the house costs $140,000. I mean, well, obviously not in California, but in some places that don't make low-cost housing illegal. Housing costs $140,000. Okay, so, and it turns out that your idea of contribution is to donate $20 a day. Here's my contribution. And your idea is to chat and make mistakes and show up and bring a few pieces of rotten wood and this and that, and this is our house, isn't it great? And I have to fix your mistakes and, do extra work when you don't show up on time because you're incompetent. And your whole strategy is to find a competent person and let them take care of you because that's what children do. Well, let's say that I don't want to upset you. And I say, you're not really contributing much to the house. Oh, my contribution. I gave my $20, my this and that. Like, okay, I don't want to have to deal with that. So, okay, you can be a contributor in the house. Then, I forgot the book. I'm so dumb, you have to nail it that way. Oh, silly me. I'm sure, here, let me distract you while you fix my mistake, right? So you have a draining energy. So the problem, if you get out of a draining energy, so if you're in a draining energy dynamic and you don't want to be in a draining energy dynamic, then you can get rid of the person. But what if they have abandonment issues and have a fit, right? Well, how can I do? I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I'm so excited about you building my house for me. What if that's too hard for you to deal with, right? Because particularly when we're going back to that sensitivity as an empath, there are plenty of incompetent children that actually don't know what to do. And they're fine with that, right? Because as long as they can find someone to, who does know what they're going to do, and maybe they'll be cute, or you can have sex with me. You can have sex with me. Just put up with my incompetence and stupidity. And so, if you try and get rid of them, and now they're going into abandonment trauma, well, that's tough, right? Particularly if you've gone through abandonment trauma and you know what all that's about. So that's tough, right? So you got pain on that side. But on the other side, they don't know what the fuck they're doing. And it doesn't seem to bother them as much as it bothers you, right? They don't know what the fuck they're doing, but they're fine, They found a wonderful person who's going to build them this house, and they're going to live happily ever after, that they can hang on to this wonderful person. But this is maddening, right? Because, this is often a child. Children are always narcissistic, that's what they're supposed to be, right? But, in a culture that doesn't produce many adults, if you haven't signed up for having a child, if you have a child, you should be ready to have a narcissist, because it is appropriate for dependent, small people to be self-absorbed, and they are, right? But if you actually thought you were getting a house partner, someone who was actually going to build the house and pay for the house and clean the house and, then this is a nightmare, right? So you have someone unconsciously taking and making things irritating and being oblivious because they're self-centered, or they're desperately clinging because they're self-centered and that they were never interested in you, or they would get their act together, or they would leave you understanding that they are a burden, a big burden. Right? Because you have to make the house twice as big, and they're presenting 10% of the skills and money to do it. Right? That's a burden, which isn't a big deal if you've got an abundance of energy, but it becomes a bigger deal when you don't actually have enough competence and wealth yourself to just fund endless charity and stuff like that. If you do, and you enjoy the company, well, it's not such a big deal. But if you don't, the project could fail. Right? If you're rowing a boat and the other person is rowing 10%, you're going round in circles and you don't have an endless amount of energy. You could fail, both of you, because one's an idiot and the other person doesn't have the discipline to throw the idiot overboard and let them sink or swim on their own, because there isn't enough skill and energy for both at this time, right? So this is, the challenge when you've got a culture that doesn't raise tremendous amount of competence and intelligence and adulthood, because you're both likely to be weak in maturity, in emotional literacy, in traumatic intelligence, in independence. You're both likely to be weak in clear, objective thinking, because the cult can't sustain its level of stupidity if it has too many strong, thoughtful, intelligent people. Because strong, thoughtful, and intelligent people are not interested in maintaining the status quo simply because it is the status quo, and because traumatized people are frightened of change. Right? And so they just want things to stay the same, right? So here's a depressing scenario. I don't want to throw you overboard, but would you get your fucking act together? I'm not trying to abandon you, but you are a net negative. After the guilt you induce, being late, the depression of doing so much of this and not being acknowledged for it because you're too self-absorbed to get that you're a net negative, discomfort of saying, hey, you're a net negative, get the fuck out of here, or grow up. That's uncomfortable. What could go wrong, right? And so all of these things, I'm just not going to say anything. I'm going to be nice. Let me go on a vacation, right? And maybe you'll get the message. So we do really, really, really stupid things because we don't know how to handle these types of situations in our cult. You know, it's like, I think I'm going to move to Morocco, says the person who doesn't want to be stuck in that binder. Oh, can I come to Morocco? No, let's see, what can I come up with? No, I'm going to France. Oh, can I come to France? Could you buy me a ticket to France? You know, so we don't know how, basically, to navigate this terrain, right? We don't know how to produce adults. We don't know how to negotiate. We don't know how to stop these kind of dynamics of draining dependency. We don't know how to stop bullying in many cases. Most people in a sociopathic environment, they say, oh, I'm being bullied. Well, just go away. It's not my problem. I'm not going to deal with it, right? You're spending too much energy. I'll find someone else, right? And so all of these, or being hurt over and over and over again by people who absolutely refuse to acknowledge that they're hurting you. Oh, that doesn't hurt. Stop making a fuss. In other words, you're the problem because you have feelings about my abuse. Now, I'm not going to listen to my abuse and I'm going to give you a lecture and I'm going to do this and this and this. And we'll all make it harder for you if you bring it up, but we're just going to keep hurting you again and again and again, indefinitely. What do you do with that? Well, you have to suppress the urge to slap them in the face. Now, if you do slap them in the face, you will not be depressed. But, you see, this is why depression is often a survival strategy. Like if you do give them a slap in the face, psychologically or otherwise, you may or may not see there's very, very deep defenses in people's, whether it's chauvinism, racism, whatever, and these things hurt other people a lot, but they pretend they're immune to them. Couldn't imagine. Of course, I never want to hurt anyone. Well, then why don't you start by listening to what does and doesn't hurt me? No. I don't need to do that. I just don't want to hurt anyone, right? I'm not going to understand you. I'm going to listen to you. And so a defense is something that requires the other person to spend more energy to change you than the benefit of the change, right? So if you say, for example, come and give me advice and I will pay you $5, and then I will take your advice and be a nicer person. Everyone would be giving advice and getting $5 because there's no defense, there's actually a reward. If you change me for the better for you, I will give you a reward. So you'll get $5, no defense, no argument, and I'll just change and be a better person. Well, everyone would give lots of advice and get lots of money and have lots of wonderful people around them that change. That's an undefended. That's the opposite of defense. That's a reward. But now imagine that you're Amazon and you don't want to hear all the many things that your employees are doing wrong. So they do something wrong and they don't want to deal with it, right? So, for example, I had a UPS driver that I make these videos, and I had a UPS driver that would do three things that dominated the neighborhood while he was here. So the first thing was he would rev the UPS truck so loud that every room in the house would hear it for about a block. So that's his first, I'm here, everyone. Second is he played music so loud that for the entire block, the music was so loud it would show up on this microphone. And the third thing he would do he would make loud guttural sounds. Hey, ho, hoo, just randomly. That was his, or he would sing his songs from across the street, playing out of his van. So he's doing this for months. And finally, I happen to be outside rather than in the middle of making a video when he's doing this. And I say, just, so you know, you are interrupting my videos. You are the most noticeable and noisy delivery person I've ever encountered. And it's affecting my life. And he looks at me with a straight face and he says, you don't understand that this is my job? So this is a dickhead who's asking me to spend energy so that he can spend less energy accommodating anything, right? So I get out my camera and I record him doing all of this. Because I say, well, I'm going to complain, and UPS does not want you doing this and ruining their reputation. So I will complain. He says, I'm not worried about it. I get out my camera and I record him as he does this to the neighbor, and the neighbor revs his van, plays his music, and he quickly tones it down, and then he's never done that again, right? And I post the video on YouTube, the noisiest UPS driver ever. Now, he is so sociopathic in the sense that the idea that he could, invade the soundscape of an entire block indefinitely with huge engine revs followed by screeching stops, because it isn't enough to just floor the accelerator and go 100 feet forward and then screech, you've got to screech and stop on the other side. That's the other side of flooring the accelerator on a little, and then all this shouting and gestures and all that, and then, people might be sleeping, people might have a night job, people might be doing blogs, videos, watching a movie, and not actually want to be in, to have his music and shouting be the dominant sound element, right? Pretty obvious to anyone but him, which is why, but to someone who's that out to lunch, you have to wonder, he really thinks that I'm ruining his job. That's what he thinks, right? And he's clearly aggressive and doesn't care what anyone else thinks. So is he going to smash the window of my car if he loses his job because he shouldn't have the job in the first place? Is he going to throw something at me? I mean, this is an unknown. So this is the confrontation that's uncomfortable, right? So my body feels, an awareness that this is an unknown threat. And I'm confronting someone's mode of reality, right? Or I can just go along with the delusion that he has to rev and screech and shout and play music so loud that you can hear it, hundreds and hundreds of feet in every single direction, in every room of the house, right? This is his job, right? He couldn't wear headphones. No, right? So, but sociopaths, they want you to spend energy so that they don't have to. Why should he have to charge his headphones when he could play music for the whole street and not have to remember them or buy them in the first place, right? So this is a defense. right? He could have said, oh, I'm so sorry, and that's the end of that. But no, he demands more energy expenditure. Got to make the video, got to upload the video to YouTube, got to send it to UPS, right? Well, UPS hasn't replied. He's stopped doing that because now there's a record, but UPS hasn't replied, right? Because they're rewarded by not replying, right? By not acknowledging it. You try and get through to this, and Amazon's hit its phone number here, and then it's hit its phone number here, and then call this, and then do this, and then we'll call you, and then this. They're not making it easy, because then every little thing that goes wrong, they'd hear about it, and they would know, right? And then they'd have to be on the hook for doing something. But if they hide their phone number and this, it's called a defense. You've got to spend 15 minutes figuring out where Amazon has hidden their phone number, because they don't want you to know, because then they might actually have to hear your complaint, and then they might actually have to do something about it, and now they're spending energy. Their idea is they want to say that they're the greatest, they're the most consumer-centric business in the world. It's a wonderful line. So where's your phone number? Oh no, we don't want to hear from our customers. We're so consumer-centric that we psychically know what they want. And so you don't even have to phone us. That's why we don't have a phone number. We're that consumer-centric, right? And we don't want to talk about this. If you try and interview Amazon about this, they ask you to send a snail mail, right? Not an email, because that would be efficient, right? Send a post, and then we won't reply to you, right? And then do this, and then do this, and talk about this. Make everything difficult for you to cause us more work, so that we can continue doing what we're doing, and we'll make it so hard that it's worth putting up with our bullshit, so that you don't have to contact us, right? In other words, if they forgot, like Amazon likes to forget their flours and their Whole Foods so I order 3 types of flours just to be safe, right? I only want 1, but you'd think they'd manage to get 1 out of 3 if they say they're in stock, right? But they never do. It's like, no flours again, right? So how do you deal with this, right? How do you deal with this? What's the response, right? It's difficult. So if they make it hard, then you don't complain about it. You just say, okay, I guess I'll give up on fresh flours indefinitely, because it's too much trouble to mention it, and that's deliberate. That's a defense. If you approach someone who owes you some money and they walk across the street, now you've got to walk across the street to get your money back. And then they come up with this lie, and then they come up with that lie, and then they avoid the street altogether, and then they say it's in the mail. And what they're basically saying is, if I make it so difficult for you to even talk about it, then we could just forget that I ever owe you some money, and I can say, hey, nice to see you. Oh, you haven't forgotten yet? Let me make it really hard for you again, and really uncomfortable for you, right? And let's pretend and project this reality out there as if everything's wonderful between us, and let's do it publicly, so that you then have to make me feel on the spot, right? If someone at a party said, oh, good to see you, and I say, where's my money? No, it's not good to see you. It'd be nice to see my money. Oh, he's so rude at the party, right? Ruining the vibe. You see? So you can play, the essence of a defense is that first I'm going to do something good for me that's bad for you. Then I will do it again until you stop me, because I'm a sociopath. And then every time you try and stop it, I will make it harder for you than it is for me to continue the behavior, so that I will slowly wear you down, where just in order to achieve your right, you will have spent so much energy, it's worse than just accepting it. It's like if you have to hire a lawyer for $100,000 to get someone to pay their $15,000 bill, and they know that, and so they say, see you in court, and waste 100,000 of your money, then they'll pay it, right? And then you're out 90,000, right? That's a defense. And it's hostile, right? So that's depressing. To realize that to get justice, you're going to lose $85,000 here and $85,000 here, and that's justice? That's fucking depressing. It's not a justice system. It's an insane asylum. It's an act of profound stupidity. And then it takes 2 years of your life to actually get a result that should have taken one person 15 minutes to arbitrate? That's fucking insane. So you have depression in spades. Attorneys are depressed. And then you have people being legalized, by bullies. Now you have the legal system is the big bully, right? So we've got $1 million to pay our lawyers to jack up your legal bills so that you go bankrupt before you can get justice. The great American justice system. Aren't you proud of the law, the law of the land, a land of law? Whoa, aren't we wonderful? We just destroy person after person's economy to just play out bullying in an economic sphere. How fucked up? Well, don't say that in court. You will have contempt of court. Just the whole thing is fucked up. It's draining people. And that's, so you say, goddamn, I'd love to take you to court. It's just the court is so corrupt in its outcome, $100,000 for this or whatever, that it's worse than not. It's more unjust to go to court. But let's call it the justice system, right? That's depressing, right? So it's punishing you for doing the right thing is another way of doing it. So that's actually a pretty good catch-all. You will be depressed if you are chronically punished for doing the right thing and observe that you are rewarded for being someone you don't like, and that other people you don't like are being rewarded for the things you don't like about them, and that nobody cares about it. That's a fucked up, depressed reality. And anything along those lines that you can't do anything about, depression is a survival strategy for that. So these are a lot of the logistical and psychological reasons. There's also hereditary aspects, right? Meaning, if you're a third-generation slave and you've been in a corrupt power system for 3 fucking generations, and your great-grandmother learned that the only way to survive was to shut up and suppress her feelings, and your grandmother learned that the only way to survive was to shut up, be raped, and suppress her feelings, and so did your mother, your biological lineage is teaching you you're in a fucked up reality where shutting up, being depressed, is going to help you survive the sociopathic environment you're being born into. So you become predisposed. Your body is producing the depressive chemicals already in the womb because you're noticing that your mother is surviving after she suppresses those feelings. So you're born predisposed to depression. So that's, again, a psychological moving into the body. But then there are also situations where the body just doesn't work in some way. You can think of it like an engine not working. Let's say you scrape something in one of the cylinders where the piston's going up and down. And so now the explosion is getting around the piston. It's not a tight fit anymore. So you're now wasting more gas to get less miles. So when the engine was new or functioning, you got 30 miles to the gallon. But now you're getting 5 miles to the gallon because so much of that energy the system isn't working, basically. So in, all kinds of hereditary aspects, the energy that you've got, you eat the same amount of food as everyone else, you have the same amount of sunlight, you drink the same amount of water, that's your fuel, but it doesn't flow as easily for your body as it does for somebody else's body. And so I'm exhausted at the point when other people still have lots of energy. That's depressing because you realize, particularly in a cult that ranks you as a good person if you're a winner and a bad person as a loser, you realize you can't win. If you're getting 5 miles to the gallon and then other people are getting 30, you can't win. So what's the point, right? I'm going to be a loser no matter what. And in a physiologically illiterate culture, meaning where most of us don't understand our bodies, nobody's going to say, oh, you poor thing, you've got gene 806, and so you work as hard as I do, but very little comes out. You poor thing, let's fix that gene. That would be competent. Instead, we're like, you loser, right? Why don't you do it? You'd be like everyone else, right? And so you just feel shame and are punished for the flaw in your genes that you don't know what to do about, and neither does anyone else, right? So that's depressing. So you've got physical aspects. You've got the hereditary psychological aspects. You've got learned helplessness from, if you're Black in a cult that thinks it's fun to kill you for being Black, and you learn that there are bullies that are going to antagonize you. See, and you grow up around a dad who is resigned to bullying because it never worked out to try and defend his rights. So you don't even know what it's like to fight for something healthy. And you're ashamed and angry that your dad didn't do more. But he didn't do more because he would have been killed, because your life would have been threatened. And you don't like that, right? So that's the reality. You're in a fucked up sociopathic cult. But you don't like the reality. You don't want to accept the reality. That's a draining battle, by the way. This is reality. And it is not the reality I want. I want this reality. I don't accept this reality. I've got to spend energy rejecting reality. And I've got to spend energy imagining this other reality. And then I've got to feel the pain of the gap. And then I've got to tolerate that pain. I've got to spend energy suppressing and medicating the pain. That's depressing. Meaning it's consuming all your energy, so there's very little left over to actually do the things and be the person you want to be. That's depressing. When every good thing that you do is undervalued, punished, minimized, attacked, ignored, dishonored, violated, and you are rewarded for being dysfunctional. Like I grew up with 5 siblings, and my parents would give more attention systematically to each child acting out in a unique way. And they would get upset when the children were happy and peaceful. Guess what happened, right? When I would babysit the children, they would be happy and peaceful and like themselves. My parents would come home and get upset because things were too quiet and too happy. And within 5 minutes, they would have sent out all the verbal and biological cues, and all of my siblings would act up. My siblings were systematically trained to be dysfunctional to get what they needed most, which was regulation and attention and validation. My parents gave that to them on condition that they became dysfunctional. And they did, each in their own way, became very dysfunctional. And they lost who they were. It wasn't their nature to be dysfunctional. But if you are punished for everything good and rewarded for everything sick, you're going to follow the reward, particularly when you're young. And you're going to go against your own nature, which drains you, in order to get the reward, which doesn't fill you up as much as you're being drained. And so you will be depressed. Because you're spending energy fighting who you are. Your nature is honorable, is decent, but an honorable, decent person is being punished. And a liar and a betrayer is being rewarded. So you have to fight your goodness in order to become ugly enough for the Hunger Games of a sociopathic cult. How terribly sad. How terribly lonely. To realize that I don't have the courage to be myself, but I hate who I've become. How fucking depressing is that, right? So depression is not a disorder. We've got a disordered cult that doesn't know how to respond to the many screaming symptoms that being dysfunctional is. Producing, right? We just don't know how to respond and change the cult. We don't know how to teach ourselves and our children to do something better. So numbing out, and then of course addiction tends to drain our energy. We fight ourselves to a certain extent with many addictions are toxic. So then you drain energy, right? You drain energy again. So then you have less energy, right? Because you're spending that addiction to suppress your feelings. Why don't you just get mad at the old bag, Oh, we don't want to hurt mom's feelings. Let's just slowly kill ourselves with alcohol, listening to her blather on again, right? How compassionate is it to leave her in her sociopathic delusions? Because she'd rather kill each of her children slowly or quickly, rather than deal with what she never wanted to deal with in her fucked up version of childhood, right? So, this is, there isn't an easy way around this, and that's why we suppress the whole thing, right? So these are some of the things that I see as the cause of depression. How about you? What do you see? What do you think is the reason you're depressed? What I've listed or all the other things, right? Thank you.